And with that, we are into another episode of Radio Free Innsmouth. This one is, of course, the Manilla Road finale. So here we are on their first album after their mid-90s reunion that didn't put anything out until 2001. And you can hear some very technical bass playing, technical drums, foreboding guitars, letting you know that Mark the Shark Shelton is back. Oh, I timed that well. Guitar solo comes right in. Hell yeah, dude! So, of course he's got to kick it off with some crazy fucking soloing as we get into some very spooky and haunting riffs. So yeah, Manilla Road's back in 2001 with Atlantis Rising. Unfortunately, Mark Shelton tore his vocals, I think, on 3 separate occasions. Once on the Crystal Logic album, he tore his vocal cords. Then he did it again doing the high-pitched Slayer screams on Out of the Abyss. And then finally he completely blew them out on his solo project album, Circus Maximus. But that's okay, because he can still hit the lower registers. And he hired this guy, Mark Hellroady Patrick, who, or not Mark, shit. Brian Hellroady Patrick, who sounds almost exactly like him, and the reason he's called Hellroady is he was their roadie in the 80s. He listened to so much Manilla Road back then that he can do a pretty flawless imitation of Mark's vocals, so that's good. Anyways, that song was called Megalodon. You get it? Because that's a really big shark, and Mark the Shark Shelton's back. Sharks, and yeah, you get it? It's a joke title, kinda, huh? Well, whatever. I thought it was kind of clever, but apart from that particular song title, the rest of this album is a concept album about the Aesir, so the Norse gods, coming back in a newly arisen Atlantis to fight against the great old ones of H.P. Lovecraft, so kind of an order against chaos dichotomy. So we start out with Atlantis Rising, which is kind of an interesting, almost synth-based, calm track. So the Manilla Road post-reunion thing isn't all about straight-up thrashing brutality like they were kind of pushing towards with their stuff in the latter half of the 80s. Instead, the thrash is turned up to 11, but the prog parts are turned up as well, as you will now hear. Spooky water noises! There we go. So what's going on here is that Mark is running his guitar through a synth pedal, which he's set to an arpeggiated mode. So you have this looping, super fast synthetic arpeggio, kind of giving it a Vangelis-esque feel, and then he's going to underlay some clean guitar that kind of pushes things forward. So a little bit of electronic looping showing that they've moved forward in time with metal music as a whole, but there's still a tune to the past. It's very retro sounding. You'll notice if you're listening to this in stereo and if the bit rate isn't too fucking crunched, that's actually 2 different voices playing off of each other. It's not just a single voice, but they're in such good harmony that it could be mistaken for a reverb effect, unless you're really paying attention. So there's a reference to The Deluge, one of their most successful 80s albums. Now they're living in Poseidon's wake. So this is a King Crimson reference, In the Wake of Poseidon. Good album, probably influenced Manilla Road a lot. Might have to cover that on the show sometime. That's one of my favorite King Crimson albums. It's rather under-recognized, much like Manilla Road. Like I said, it's not all thrashy, spooky, evil metal. There's also very progressive rock influenced aspects to the new Manilla Road sound that at the same time isn't a new sound. They're picking up from where they left off and innovating on it. So Probably one of the better reunions in music history, as far as continuing the legacy of their music. So up next, we're going to get into that thrashier side, where they keep the progressive elements, so the technicality and the complexity, but also it's considerably heavier than quite a bit of their 80s stuff even. So a two-part riff. That's the first part. Here's the second part. First part's that very heavy couple note thing, followed by a melodic fill made of a series of palm-muted notes. They're very progressive. And then we get into some more modern metal influences. This is almost kind of a beat-down hardcore drum beat. But instead of just playing breakdown, instead the guitars are kind of doing this loping melodic figure over it as the vocals drive ahead with a chant-like cadence. So that's Atlantis Rising in a nutshell. Really good album, very underrated by fans of Manilla Road, who see it as sort of like an unsteady comeback, but I actually think it's one of their better albums. It's really cool, it's very unique. But as we go further into the aughts, which I think is what we're calling that decade now, like I said, Manilla Road is upping the technicality and the prog and the thrash all at the same time, sometimes even in the same song, as on the first song on their 2011 album, Playground of the Damned. So here's that more melodic part. You can see even his solos have taken on a bit more depth to them instead of always being that noise explosion, which I do love. He can also do these slower burning melodic leads that weave in and out of the music. Not really something you heard in 80s Manilla Road. And then immediate seamless transition into a very prog thrash riff. And lots of cool drumming tricks. One of the things about this era of Manilla Road is that he changed lineups almost like every album, but he always got good people. That Mark Shelton, you know? Now we're talking. Back into that melodic lead style that's blended with these thrash riffs, and those are definitely thrash riffs. So, very good stuff. He also started up a side project called Hellwell, which moved further into prog rock, but also into straight up death metal territory, where it's him on guitars. The initial album had a guy called Thumper on drums, and then the keyboards are played by E.C. Hellwell. The second Hellwell album, which I actually think is the better of the two, actually brings back Randy Thrasher Fox on drums for the first time in fucking forever, which was great to hear. And of course Mark and E.C. Hellwell. The thing about E.C. Hellwell is, so that's the keyboardist, right? But I went up to Mark after a show once and asked him, hey man, how's that Hellwell doing? And that Hellwell guy, you know? And he was like, Jub, let me tell you about that Hellwell guy. So Hellwell is actually me. That was an alias I used back in the 70s when I was writing
stories. Science fiction stories.
Like The Riddle Master. That one I made into a song on Crystal Logic. Yeah, I wrote that. But you can't tell anybody. It's a secret. But yeah, I was E.C. Hellwell the whole time.
Oh my god!
So kudos to you regular listeners out there who were wondering, when's he going to get back to E.C. Hellwell? I just did. It was Mark Shelton the whole time. So the band Hellwell was literally Mark Shelton and whoever he happened to get on the drum stool that week. But yeah, really good stuff. It pushes the prog pretty fucking hard, but also the death metal, as I mentioned earlier. What do I mean by that? Let's find out. So heavier keyboard presence, obviously, and then you got the very rollicking style of Randy Thrasher Fox on drums. Kind of a weird Rush-esque stop-start riff. Working through the matrix of that twisting and turning guitar riff. Now we're into some proper thrash. Okay, I can't just sing along to it. That's cheating. You can see these vocals are about 50-50 power metal and death metal vocals. At least right now. They get more deathly. Like right there. It's very Lovecraftian lyrics. And now, we're like full death metal. Which is really cool to hear, you know. He opens a door, or closes a door, opens a window, you know. His vocal cords shot out in the high end, so he decides to go into death metal. Very admirable. When life gives you lemons, you ask to see life's manager, god damn it. So really cool stuff, that album. And finally, we're getting to the last couple Manilla Road albums, those, of course, being The Blessed Curse and To Kill a King. They're both great, particularly The Blessed Curse. What was cool about these albums is they'd finally gotten a stable lineup on the prior album with Noidi on drums, who is every bit as great a drummer as Randy Thrasher Fox. And also a really cool dude that's also been around since the 70s. I had a really in-depth talk with him about the depths of the new wave of British heavy metal with Quartz, because Quartz had just died, R.I.P. that guy, even though I'm totally spacing on his name. Fuck, sorry, dude! You forgot my name! Woo. Or I guess he's British, so voice. But anyways, I got a stable lineup put up to Mysterium, which was not really my favorite Manilla Road album, but it's got some good tracks on it. But The Blessed Curse, when that one came out, Mark Shelton said, I think this is our best since The Deluge. And I know every band says that. Our new album is like a mix of our newer stuff and our greatest album. You know, Glenn Benton pulls that with a fucking Deicide album. It always sounds, oh, it's just like Legion, except like newer, more brutal, that. But with Manilla Road, he's actually telling the truth. The Blessed Curse is one of their best albums. It unites a lot of the cool acoustic stuff Mark Shelton had been gotten into over the years. He was always a big country fan and a big folk dude. It brings that into a metal context and blends them together with an album that's about reaching back into the past in a world of modern decadence, pulling out that our species has forgotten. Fittingly, the album cover, a hand coming out of the dust of empires, raising up a skull, a symbol of the mind. Intelligent philosophy, of course, which is the original science. Mark Shelton would call the science of man in this song, Tomes of Clay, which I have played excerpts from on this show before. I'm going to do it again because it's one of my favorite Manilla Road songs. Fuck you! So a cool Middle Eastern inflected beginning, which fits with the whole Sumerian theme of this particular song and the album as a whole. We're going to get into some cool Noidi drumming too here, lots of fills, and he's also got that weird little wind chimey thing on his drum set that fits well. He's hitting all kinds of weird toms in conjunction with the music. This almost feels like something Iron Maiden could have done. Oh no! I said they weren't an Iron Maiden ripoff. Yeah, they're not. Iron Maiden never did anything this cool. Womp womp. Now we're getting into the acoustic stuff I was talking about before. Keep in mind, this is on an album that's also full of thrash metal. So, a higher caliber of composition than most metal bands can bring forth. Like I said, really good drumming from Noidi. His real name is like Neudemeyer, I don't know, some wacky German name. And I think this is a duet between Hellroadie and the Shark, but it could be Hellroadie overdubbing himself or the Shark overdubbing himself. You can't really tell. They have very similar voices, which I think was the point. Hellroadie's like backup, you know? Like he does all the frontman shit. And then he hits the high notes when Mark can't hit him.
science fiction stories.
So the truth that was lost is found in our embracing of our past selves. Very poetic, and definitely that's kind of the summation of Manilla Road's personal philosophy. It's a shame that Mark Shelton has passed on. You know, I knew him relatively well, not as much as like I was very close friends at the barbecue. Well, I didn't go to the barbecue, unfortunately, but I definitely hung out with him after the show. He was at my buddy's barbecue because my buddy helped put the show on, and then he helped put another show on, and then some Antifa guy that we thought was our friend, but he's actually just a faggot, tried to get Manilla Road in trouble, like saying they're racist or whatever, even though it's not true. But what are you gonna fucking do, am I right? Manilla Road, great band. Check out all their albums. They're all great. They've got very distinct eras to their music. They've been around. They've done basically most of what you can do in the metal genre, I think. You know, they never put out a straight-up ambient album. Who's to say that wasn't forthcoming? Unfortunately, Mark Shelton's passed on. But I, for one, will never forget him. I think he made a pretty big impact on my life, and hopefully I've convinced you to check out more Manilla Road stuff. I will see you next week. Odin willing, my computer doesn't fucking die again. That was gay as shit.
The moon burns full and bright. It seems we've been here before. The fog creeps through the night. Come to all shining tall.